Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a source that totally dismantles this massive illusion almost all of us have bought into. I'm talking about the toxic idea that performative busyness somehow equals actual value. So, if you've ever felt just utterly exhausted at the end of the day, but completely unproductive, yeah, you're absolutely in the right place.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Picture the scene. It's 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday. You're hunched over your laptop in a dark kitchen, right? The harsh blue light is just hitting your exhausted face as you reply to this endless, sprawling email thread about a slide deck that, let's be honest, frankly, nobody in the history of your company is ever going to open. Your chest is tight with anxiety. You've been at it for 12 straight hours, and yet you feel absolutely nothing that even resembles achievement. You just feel caught in a machine of your own making.
But hey, as far as the internet's concerned, you're doing it perfectly, right? You're setting the alarm for 5 a.m., taking those freezing cold showers, repeating all those #ready morning routines. But what's actually driving all this frenetic motion? Really, it's a desperate internal monologue. It's this flashing signal to the universe and, well, to your boss that just screams, I am here, I am awake, I am one of the good ones, please do not lay me off. You're the poster child for modern hustle culture, perfectly optimized. And yet, you are somehow going backwards.
So that brings us to Section 1, Seneca and the Illusion of Busyness.
Because look, what actually moves a career forward isn't a new biohacked morning routine or some crazy complex productivity template. It turns out, the ultimate mentor for this exact modern crisis is actually a Roman politician who lived 2,000 years ago. Seneca coined this fascinating term. He called it disidiosa occupatio. That translates to busy idleness, or occupation without work. As a core advisor to Emperor Nero, he knew the complex machinery of looking important from the absolute inside of it. In his writings, he describes people whose calendars are blocked completely solid, whose days are just totally consumed by things that feel urgent, but whose professional lives amount to almost nothing. Does that sound like your average remote worker today? Because to me, it is spot on.
And Seneca makes this blunt, honestly humiliatingly accurate argument. Think about it. We guard our money with paranoid care. We'll aggressively defend a parking space. We negotiate our salaries down to the final dollar. But then, with almost absurd politeness, we turn around and hand over the only genuinely non-renewable asset we own, our time, to literally anyone who sends us a calendar invite. We just give it away.
Which leads us into our next section, Section 2, the trap of proof of effort.
So the crucial point is, if you look really closely at your week, you'll probably find a pretty uncomfortable truth staring back at you. Half of your working hours produce literally nothing except evidence that you were working. The source defines this proof of effort as any task whose only real deliverable is proof that you were trying. And think about that for a second. It actually feels harder than real work. Why? Well, because real work has an endpoint. You write the code, you close the sale, you design the graphic, and boom, it's done. Proof of effort, it has no endpoint. It's just a bottomless pit of corporate anxiety, filled to the brim with buzzwords and circular feedback loops.
Just consider the classics here. We're talking status update meetings that change zero strategic decisions, or those 40-page pitch decks you rebuild from scratch for a catch-up meeting that just gets canceled anyway. Or, my personal favorite, that desperate reply-all email sent right before midnight just to show everyone you're online. Once the source gives us a name, you literally cannot unsee it. You start noticing that colleague who narrates his impossibly heavy workload in every morning stand-up, but, ships absolutely nothing for a whole quarter. And if we're being completely honest with ourselves, we start noticing ourselves doing a smaller, maybe slightly more embarrassed version of the exact same thing.
And this brilliantly illustrates a core metaphor we really need to grasp to break out of this cycle. You can measure a ship by the wake it leaves behind or by its actual position on the map. Hustle culture exclusively measures the wake, the visually loud, turbulent, chaotic froth of Slack messages and endless syncs. It requires constant, frantic motion, and it promotes exhaustion as some kind of badge of honor. But actual output, the position, that is quiet. It's definitive and it's easily measurable. It's shipped products and finalized decisions that actually remain valuable long after you log off for the day.
Okay, on to Section 3, the messy reality of doing less.
Now, you might be sitting there thinking, great, I'll just step back and do less. Easy. Online withdrawal narratives always portray quitting the grind as this clean, easy thing. You set a boundary, people respect it, and suddenly have all this time for afternoon yoga. But the source shows it's actually really messy, and doing less will initially cost you a great deal of social comfort. Take this real-world test from the author. They decided to decline a Thursday sync that had no agenda. Sounds empowering, right? But then, the decision got made without them. A colleague named Maya sent the notes at 6 that evening, and one single line quietly reversed a strategic direction the author had spent an entire month building toward. Sitting with that email, the urge was to break, to hit reply, unleash a torrent of corrections, and jump right back into that exhausting hustle. Because the truth is, sometimes when you step back, things do fall apart. But instead of panicking and reverting to micromanagement, this setback triggered a powerful shift in strategy. The goal wasn't just to hide, it's to fundamentally change the request. You have to stop asking to be invited to meetings just to be seen. Instead, start asking what decision the meeting will produce. If nobody can name a decision, you do not go. If they can, you go, but you arrive with the position already written down. The meetings you attend become far fewer, but, let me tell you, considerably more dangerous. You stop passively generating that froth we talked about, and you start actually steering the ship.
So, how do we actually do this? Let's move to Section 4, 3 practices to reclaim your output.
These are highly actionable steps to stop generating froth and actually move your career forward. We're forgetting the 5 a.m. alarms and the ice baths here. The source material outlines 3 real anti-hacks: running a proof of effort audit, naming the decision, and practicing the loss. And a quick warning, each of these will cost you some social comfort right out of the gate, well before they pay you anything in actual career capital.
Let's break them down. Step 1. Run a proof of effort audit. Open your calendar and your sent folder for the last 7 days. Next to every item, ruthlessly write down the name of the person who actually used the output of that hour. And I mean used it, not who just received it, who actually used it to make a decision or advance a project. For a lot of us, most of the week comes back completely blank. That blank column is a terrifying mirror, but it's also a realization. It is your real workload. And here's the kicker. Absolutely nobody in your company will ever ask you to stop doing those tasks. You have to stop them yourself.
Practice number 2 is answering vague calendar invites with a polite but honestly devastating question. What specific decision are we making in this block of time? The author suggests trying this directly. You will watch roughly a third of your meetings just completely evaporate on contact. The organizers will suddenly realize they just wanted to chat or maybe brainstorm aloud, or, let's be real, just spread the anxiety of a project around. The people who can answer the question clearly, those are the only people actually worth working with.
And for the third practice, we bring Seneca's timeless philosophy right back to our modern corporate calendars. He called it premeditatio malorum, which basically translates to the premeditation of evils. And, fair warning, it is by far the least comfortable step of the 3. Here's how you practice the loss. Spend 5 minutes a week imagining the absolute worst-case scenario. Assume your role is suddenly eliminated tomorrow, or your flagship project is canceled due to budget cuts. Really just sit with that heavy reality for a minute. Then, write down what you would actually miss doing versus what you would just miss being seen doing. The gap between those 2 lists, that is the exact size of your proof of effort problem. Sitting with this separates genuine, quiet, strategic problem solving from the hours you sacrifice just to protect pointless slide decks. Let's move to Section 5 and see how this builds. Calm reads as seniority. Think about it. The person who gets promoted to the executive suite is rarely the one with the fullest calendar. It is almost never the person answering emails at 11:43 p.m. It's the person whose output is legible without a voiceover narration. If you constantly have to explain to everyone how hard you worked, your work is not speaking for itself. When you finally stop generating that chaotic froth, 2 distinct things happen in sequence. Month 1 brings the panic of invisibility. It is deeply unpleasant. You feel lazy, you miss the dopamine hits of visible exertion, and you develop this creeping paranoia that you're falling behind and might get fired. You just have to endure this phase. Do not break. Because month 2 brings the clarity of output. The water clears. The only things anyone can see are the things you actually shipped, and your signal-to-noise ratio becomes unmatched. You become known entirely for being effective, not just busy. Let's ground this one last time in Seneca's story. It's tragic, but incredibly enduring. He advised the volatile Emperor Nero, who eventually ordered him to die. The man who wrote more clearly than anyone in the ancient world about the theft of time had his own time brutally taken by his employer. He knew the absolute risk of his position. But you know what? He wrote his truth anyway, and those essays have outlived the emperor by 2,000 years.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Only this time, the narrative changes. Last Tuesday at 11:43 p.m., the author of our source material was asleep. The slide deck eventually got built during normal working hours. The email thread completely resolved itself. Nobody emailed the next morning to ask where they had been. And yeah, for a few days, that bruised the ego. It was genuinely a bit humiliating to realize you aren't actually indispensable in the middle of the night. That is, until the real meaning finally sets in.
Nobody had been watching in the first place. That is the grand tragedy of the modern corporate grind. But if you're brave enough to accept it, it's also your ultimate release. You can finally step off the treadmill. So, the question is, are you going to keep making froth tomorrow morning, or are you going to start actually steering the ship? Thank you so much for watching this explainer. I really hope it helps you reclaim your time, and I will see you on the next one.